Today we're going to be talking about parenting. We're going to be talking about how to raise a positive child in a negative world. It sounds a lot easier than it is. I have 3 grown children and a grandchild, so I know firsthand. I can't imagine raising little kids now and teenagers now, because social media has changed the things. It changed the name of the game. Economics, because a lot of us, we got to work a lot of hours. So we don't always have, the time to put in. Some of us, maybe we're a single parent. It's even less time to put in. Some of us work 2 jobs. So there's so many reasons. But as I go through this, hopefully you get some tips, about how to do this. So this is not the beginning and all. These are some proven tips. I've been doing this for, too long. I guess I've been doing this workshops for about 35, almost 40 years now. Yeah. I'm 62, everybody's looking at me like, are you that old? But yeah, so I've been doing this in a long time, man. And I work with every population. So it's a curse and it's a blessing. It's a blessing because I get to see so many people. It's kind of a curse because you kind of see them early. And you see if they don't change the way they behave, where they're going to end up at. So it gives you a different perspective. Like I'll meet a child and I watch everything he does, and then I'll be talking to somebody that's been incarcerated and they had the same characteristics. The difference is nobody intervened in between. So hopefully we leave here today, we have some tips. Any questions or comments? Feel free to raise your hand, jump in anytime. This is not wait to the end. What you allow in will ultimately come out. I want that to be the thing that we think about throughout this whole thing. What we take in, what our kids take in, is going to come out. I'll give you the perfect example. How many of you heard something in the morning and right now it's still in your head? You ain't pay attention to it. You woke up this morning, maybe it was something you saw on TV. I got it better, since some of us are, not teenagers. It's a song that I guarantee you, if once you heard the first couple of bars, you start singing the song. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's that song in your head that once you hear the first couple of bars, you may not have heard it for decades, but soon it comes. So it's the same way with our kids. It's like you look at stuff, you may not pay attention to it, but your mind is constantly taking pictures. Your brain is like a computer. It's constantly processing. Most of us don't realize it, but it is. When you're looking at me, when I first came in, you're processing. This dude's coming in, he's late. I've been sitting here for a period of time. No, but you do. You process things as soon as you see it. If you see a new car, you're processing it. You see something you don't like, you're processing it. So as we go to this, think about how, as we raise our kids, we kind of got to do a better job of controlling what they're processing. We can't control everything. But I give you the perfect example. If you have a child at home and he's watching a lot of stuff with chaos and, all kind of crazy stuff, man, disrespectful stuff, whatever, and you're home, he may be good. But now he goes to school and that's what other people are doing. His norm quickly shifts because that's in his head. And you're thinking, not my kid. Some kids do a great job of controlling it. If you've been to school recently, most of them don't. And I've met some good kids, especially when you meet the parents. But the stuff they're exposed to, it comes out. It's like if you're right-handed and you write with your right hand, I don't care how long you don't pick up a pen to write. If I give you a pen, automatically, without thinking, you start using your right hand. That's what we do. So think of it this way. Think of your kid as a blank canvas. A blank canvas when they're born. And you're painting a picture. You get to determine the colors, where they go, what it looks like, where the red goes, where the yellow goes, where the black goes, where the white goes. You determine that. So think about it. When I was a kid, my father used to always tell me, he says, and as parents, this is my challenge to you. We have 2 choices. Either you rise to the occasion or you shrink to the circumstances. We're in the time right now that's challenging for raising our kids. I look at my grandson who's 4 years old. I look at the things that he's exposed to. I give you the perfect example. He loves math blocks. So he's watching math blocks, which is a child's thing. But in the middle of math blocks, something else intervenes and they're cursing. So somebody else had nothing better to do than hack a kid's thing and put stuff in there. Now, if I'm not paying attention, he's taking us in. So that's how that's why we got to pay attention, because it's not always what we do. Sometimes it's what we don't do as parents, or even as people. It's not always the decisions we make. Sometimes decisions we don't make. So we have to think about it. We got to really start to think about it. So you got 2 choices. Either you rise to the occasion or you shrink to the circumstances. If you do the same thing, expect the same thing. That's just the reality, man. If you look around our society right now, That's what you see. You see the result of people doing the same thing, getting the same thing. For instance, if I have people who work for me, I get to hire people. I'm on film, so I can't say any names, but last week I had to sit down with somebody explaining to them what a job was, because they didn't understand. You got to be here on time. You got responsibilities you got to take care of. So if you dig deeper, they were late to school every day. When it was hot, they didn't go to school. When it rained, they didn't go to school. Now they're adults, they got a job. When it's hot, I don't want to go to work. When it's raining, I don't want to go to work. You know, and they're still living at home. Now in my house, we don't do that. But if they're living at home and there's no expectation, so they can work and not get paid, it's no big deal. She's 22 years old. Now what's going to happen when she's 40 years old? And maybe mom or dad is not there anymore. You know, how is this person going to take care of themselves? And I know a lot of times we don't think about it, but think about it this way. Some of the choices we make and don't make are generational. It's not just your children, it's their children that could possibly fall into the same trap. And I've seen generations of generations where they go to jail, one after another, because it just kind of passes down because it becomes the norm. So we got to really take advantage of what we do have that's positive. Teach them their value. That's the first thing we got to teach them their value. If I had a dollar bill, right? Let me see if I got a dollar bill. My wife didn't take all my money, so she left me with $1. All right. So how much is this worth? It's not a trick question. People look at me like, how much is this worth? How much is it worth? How much is it worth? See, we got to teach our kids, man, that they have value no matter what. They have value. So what, they fail the test? They have value. So what, they may not have the best clothes in school? They still have value. So what, they may not be the smartest guy in their class? Maybe they can't play sports. They still have value. Don't raise your hand. But when I talk to parents and I ask them, you know, how much time do you spend teaching your child to have value? You'd be surprised at the answers I get. We'll buy nice clothes, we'll buy all this great stuff. We do the great stuff for them, but we don't have conversations with them about they do have value. And what's happening right now, the world is establishing the value of our kids. The world is saying what you're worth because you look like. The world is saying what you're worth because of where you live at. The world says what you're worth because of what school you go to. And we're not sending a different message. We're allowing it to happen. Even if they go to school, and I'm not talking about all teachers, you have some teachers who would call your kid, you know, you're dumb, you're stupid, what's wrong with you? They say those things. So if you're not establishing it at home, they're not establishing it in school, where's it coming from? Social media. Social media is raising our children right now. It's funny because I have people who work for me and they put up some of the dumbest stuff on social media. You know, I hate kids. We work with kids. So why would you put that up on your page? Well, I didn't know who was going to see it. You have a social media, you connect it to everybody. You know, if you're familiar with social media, you see some of the pictures people put up. People commit crimes and they put it on social media. So social media, whether you like it or not, is driving our kids. And don't think for a second your kid is not looking at social media, because I've had kids in elementary school who have tablets and other kids sit there, they'll crowd around the tablet. So your child may not be exposed to social media, but somebody in that inner circle is. And if you think your kid is sitting on the side, not watching, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, it ain't happening, because they want to fit in. Think about when you were that age. You wanted to fit in. So kids do. So they watch this stuff and everybody's doing it, everybody's talking about it. You know, so it becomes part of their norm, a norm that you don't know about. So if you're not doing something positive, that's what they're taking in. That's what they're taking in. Teach them their value. It is so important. Let's talk about maturity steps. And this for us too, kids. Kids are going to go through stages. And the first stage is an unconscious competence. You know, we're the stage where children are clueless about life and what a good, healthy decisions are. They don't know. They're born. They think everything is a good time. Hey there, everything's a good time. They don't know. They don't pay bills. You know, they just having fun. You know, take you to the store. They want the most expensive stuff. You know, it was funny because my kids, when they were used to always say, "Oh, Dad, just go to the Mac machine." They never understood the concept that I had to work and put money in there so I could go to the Mac. They just knew money come out this machine. So every time they wanted something, I don't understand. Just go to the machine. So kids, they're just clueless. So now, this goes back to what I said before. If you're not laying the foundation for them, if you're not making sure they get what's right, what's wrong, what a real norm is versus what everybody else is, who is? Who's painting on that canvas? Somebody else is painting the picture on that canvas. And you see it all the time. You pick up the news, you see it all the time. Kids are getting talked into stuff. When I used to do stuff in the prison, I would talk to people. I was amazed at the number of people were there because they were with their friends. Oh, I was with so-and-so. They did it, so I did it. You know, they would say it all the time. Gotta be careful what I say here because it's filming this. But I was in a school recently and we were having a conversation with the kids and they were in summer school. So the question I was asking them is, why are you here in summer school? I was shocked at the number of kids that were in summer school because they were cutting classes because they were hanging out with their friends. I was amazed at the number of kids who threw over there. So I kind of cracked a joke. The school didn't think it was funny. I said, this must be the largest social club because all these kids were hanging in the hallways doing this, not going to class. And they're in summer school. I mean, think about that. I had a kid who didn't miss a day of school, but he didn't go to a class the whole first semester. Yeah, that look on your face is the same look I had. I had to ask him 3 times. Can you tell it to me again? And his parents didn't know till report card time showed up. So my question was, where's the daily engagement? Hey, what did you do today in school? You know, hey, what did you learn today in school? You know, hey, my kids would tell you, I was like a lawyer. Who you hanging out with? I ain't never seen that kid before. You know, where they live at? You gotta be, you have to make sure that you're offsetting the stuff that's coming in your house. And don't let your kids shame you and embarrass you saying how you're acting. That's your job. Your job is to protect them, unconscious competence, from the things they don't know. Because they don't know. They think they know, but they don't know. That is your job. That is my responsibility. We talked about in the last workshop. My kids understood the expectations in my house. Expectations are you go to school, you do the best you can, you stay out of trouble. You know, you do your chores and stuff. Everything else is on me. I take care of everything else. That's your job. And when you step outside those expectations, these are the consequences. So we got to make sure, man, that we're establishing this stuff in our kids as we do this. The world will have you believe certain media, video games are harmless and it has no impact on your child. That's not true. It's not true. I have kids now who are, just today, one of my staff members came to me and said, hey, this little boy said to this little girl, would you do me? They're 7 years old. When do you get to they're 7 years old? And check this out, parents, some of the stuff we look at on TV, and the kid is sitting right there beside us. We think they're not paying attention because we didn't give them a coloring book or something. We think we distracted them, and they're soaking it up. So a lot of stuff our kids learn, they learn from us. We're painting on their campus. So we have to be careful. And I'm not policing you. So parents come up to you all the time, oh, well, no, I'm not policing you. I'm just telling you, when you become a parent, however you decide to become a parent, you're responsible for another life. It's no longer about you. And if your child decides to have children, that's a whole nother generation that you're impacting. So it is a big deal. So we got to make sure, man, that they're not painting the picture because there's a lady right now that's trying to sue the people who made Fortnite because I think her 13 and 14-year-old son got hooked on Fortnite. It clearly says, rated R. No under 18 can play this game or purchase this game without a parental consent. Well, how did they get the game? How did you not know your kids are shooting up the house in Fortnite and you weren't paying attention to it? Now, for the kids, it was a norm. They don't see it because their friends are playing it when they go to school. They're talking about murder and mayhem in school. You know, this has become the routine, so now it's my norm. So now, if we take a look at society right now, why are we surprised that we have people taking lives right now with no remorse? None whatsoever. Because you spent all your childhood life, and people say, well, it does matter. Because again, what you put in here is going to form and shape you. Perfect example. Some of you in this room know exactly what I'm saying. You ever went somewhere and you smelled the scent, you smelled something, and it reminded you of something else right away? You know, maybe you walked into your house and, you know, when your parents they were cooking something, you knew right away, I'm home, you know, because you smelled it. You know, it's the same way when we put stuff in there, it's in there. And every human being, every individual does not have the strength, the mental capacity to not do some of the things they put in there. That's the fact of life. So we got to make sure that we're doing this. What are we putting in that's positive? You know, what kind of stuff you looking at on TV? What kind of conversations you having in the house? You know, social media. And you can check it out. I'm just not going to read it, but statistics clearly shows, if you research it, tells you that it does impact people. Positive, negative, mentally, physically, it does. I give you the perfect example. I use car companies as the perfect example. When you look at a car company, right? You see a woman, a good-looking woman. Every woman on the hood of the car weighs about what, like $110? She's perfect. Everything is in perfect place. And people buy cars because of that. You know, my favorite is, you ever look at a beer commercial? I don't think there's any bar you can walk into America and every woman is going to look exactly like that. No wrinkles, perfect hair, perfect skin, teeth is right, everything's perfect. They got a model but they sell their product to people. Michael Jordan's sneakers, be like Mike. How many people bought those sneakers? They were never going to be like Mike, but the media sold him a product. I mean, think about it. That's how powerful the media is, and we don't pay attention to it. Who in here watches the Super Bowl? Any football fans in here? Huge football fan. So you watch the Super Bowl. You ever notice how halftime, you could just get finished eating a full-course meal. By halftime, you're hungry. Why? Because all these food commercials comes on. If it's a water ice commercial, it can be 40 below outside. That water commercial, man, I want to read this water ice. Billboards on buses, why do you think they have them so big? Because if it goes past you enough, if you go to New York and you walk around Times Square, they don't have paper billboards. Everything is electronic. And it's human nature. You look up. Man, I'm hungry. I wasn't hungry before I got here. I want a funnel cake. I want apple pie. And think about when you go to the supermarket. You ever realize when you walk in the supermarket, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. You'll walk in there and it'll be like chocolate cake right there in the front of the supermarket in the paper towel section, because they know subliminally you're going to walk past the chocolate cake. If your kid likes chocolate cake, Mommy, I want chocolate cake before you get started. And I don't know the stats, but how many parents double back before they get halfway through the store because the kid is bugging them about this chocolate cake? So the media has a huge impact that we don't realize. And yes, it has it on our kids. The kids want us to buy certain things because they saw it on TV. They want to buy things that's probably not good for them. So I think it's important we acknowledge how it does. Conscious competence. This is the stage where we have an understanding and awareness. However, we still must put in the extra work and effort to making the right decisions. This is typically kids who, they start to progress in, I guess, early teens. I know what my mom taught me, but I'm in this classroom and everybody else is doing this. I know what my dad told me, but now I'm around my friends and they're doing this. And I'm struggling. What do I do? Well, Mom and Dad is not here. And I'm hanging out with 10 friends and 8 are doing this, I jump right in. So they know the foundation you laid, but they struggle with it. We have to stop thinking because we taught our kids something that is going to stick with them the rest of their lives. We have to reinforce stuff. We got to reinforce stuff. We got to make sure our kids understand. Like for instance, we'll talk about another workshop, but even when I hate to use the word discipline, when you're talking to your kids and you're trying to correct something, do you take time to explain why you're correcting it? Do you take time to explain why you're doing what you're doing? Or do you just impose the penalty and you roll? You got to make sure that's how you put positive stuff, explain to them. See, because if I treat you like you have value, you respond like you have value. But if I treat you like a kid your whole life, when you're 20 years old, you're still going to act like a kid. Because that's the way I treated you. Well, in my mind, if I think you view me as a kid, why am I going to come to you have an adult conversation? I could be going through all kind of crap, but you know what? My dad still sees me as a little kid. My mom sees me as a little kid, so why am I going to go to them? So I go talk to my friend who's dumber than I am. A lot of our kids are taking advice from people who should not be giving them advice. And that's just the reality of it all. How many times has somebody said, because my friend told me? Where did you get that from? My friend told me. You hear that over and over and over again, because we have to make sure our kids do our best. And it's not 100%, but we got to do our best to make sure our kids feel comfortable talking to us. How we respond to them. Do we listen to them? Another workshop, but one way how you raise a positive kid, negative word is, do you listen to them? Even when I knew my kids weren't telling me the truth, I would always let them finish talking. Because I, love my dad to death, God rest his soul, but he was the guy that would cut you off in a heartbeat. Old school dad. If you weren't telling the truth, you weren't going to finish that sentence. So it got to the point when I got older, we didn't have conversations because I felt like, well, you're going to cut me off anyway. So now people wonder, my kid don't talk to me. Well, you can't just start talking to them when they're 16, 17 years old. You got to establish that early and have conversations, not yelling and screaming. Have conversations. Ask them why they did something. Give them a chance to explain it. And then just don't say, don't do it anymore. This is why you shouldn't do it anymore. These could be the possible consequences when you do that. Because we can't make kids do anything. When I hear parents say that, I just laugh. because we can't. Because we can't guard them, keep them around us 24 hours a day. Whoever has the most influence over your kid is going to be the leader. That's the truest definition of leadership. Whoever has the most influence is the real leader in the room. And remember that, and that is true. We got to understand that the world, they're competing for the attention of our kids. They are. As parents, and when I look back growing up, I look at my 4-year-old grandson. Most of the stuff that he has, when he got like 3 and 4, I may have paid for it, but he kind of directed me into getting it. I made a decision, but he was like, now you can talk, Grandpa, so you kind of, now I think I'm in charge, but who's really in charge? And the world knows, they compete for that, because I know if I can sell your kid something, they won't get on your nerves so bad. So bad, you won't get tired of hearing it. You may not get it right away, but birthday or Christmas, that's in your head. Man, Petey's been bugging me about this thing. So, man, I don't want to hear it no more. So they are controlling the world, and the world knows it, so they compete. That's why they make the video games full of graphics and everything, because they know that's what attracts kids. They know how to make certain clothes because they know, they count on kids, like especially kids with low self-esteem. So this kid is going to buy name brand stuff because they think that's going to make them cool, because they don't know who they are. Because we don't invest in them, remember the dollar, teach them their value. So my value is tied to what I own. So I got to have to top everything. I heard somebody tell somebody today, was talking to a kid, and he says, well, we moving, trying to buy a house. I would never had this conversation. She said, well, you got to choose between a bed and Wendy's. That's not the conversation you have with your kids. Because what you gonna do if you choose Wendy's? But that's not raising a positive child. So we got to make sure, man, at this stage, we got to make sure that we're teaching them because we're competing. And I got to say this, you may be competing with a teacher who's telling them the wrong thing. When my kids were growing up, I've had several conversations with teachers who were saying things, like in my house, we don't vote. We never voted in my house with my kids. It was not a democratic society. And I remember when I was talking to my daughter about going to college, and the counselor told her, well, I think college is your mom and dad's dream, it's not your dream. So you don't have to go. Well, we know how that turned out because she graduated college. But I ask myself all the time, how many other kids did she say that to? Who didn't go to college because some lady sitting behind a desk who went to college, by the way, and graduated is telling your kid, don't go to college. So we got to make sure, man, that as they compete, because all competition is not good. So we got to make sure, man, that we stay in the game when we're involved in raising our kids. Questions, comments so far? Keys here: communication, empathy, compassion, understanding are keys here. Communication. We got to talk to our kids. You should be having conversations with your kids. Turn the TV off conversations when you ride. My kids hated it because when we were in the car going to basketball somewhere, man, we wasn't listening to no music. We were talking. I got a captive audience now. You can't go anywhere. You got to hear what I got to say. And you better listen, because when I pick you up, you're going to get it again. So you got to start talking to them, man. Sit them down and have a conversation. How many young men I come across don't know what it is to be a man? They have no idea, who they think is okay to maybe hit a woman because that's what their friends are telling them. Yeah, she get on you, they think it's okay to steal or whatever, by any means necessary, because they're not getting that home. And somebody else is influencing them. So we got to make sure we're having those conversations, teaching our daughters, what does it mean to be a young lady? I say this all the time. Anybody can be a woman, but everybody is not a lady. There's a distinct difference. Anybody can be a man, but how many of them actually can be a role to be a father, a real father, or a real dad? Those are the things that we really got to start thinking about when we're talking to our kids, we're raising our kids. Are we preparing them for the future? Are we making sure communication, empathy? They're not going to always do what we want them to do. They're not. And we have to kind of be empathy, understanding, kind of go together. I'm not saying give in, but you ever had that moment when you're talking to your child and you ask them why they did it, in the back of your mind, you did the same thing around the same age? It's like, man, I did the same thing. So instead of putting the hammer down, why did you do that? That's the worst thing in the world. Show a little empathy. Okay, let's walk through this process. How can we get through this? How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Take what you went through where you're at that time and share it with them. but make sure you talk to them in compassion. You know, we got to stop invoking the harshest penalty every time. Have compassion. You know, everything they do does not deserve a response of the worst possible scenario. It's not. You know, there's times, man, where maybe they do something that really upset you. Take a deep breath, put yourself in timeout, come back, say, hey, let's try to work this out. Especially the older your kids get. You know, severe punishment is not always the answer. You know, and show some compassion. You know what? I understand. So let's do better. You know, maybe your kid screwed up on the test and you had in the conversation. You know they didn't study because every time you walk past the room, the TV on, something was blaring. It's okay. This is what we're going to do. You know, you show them compassion. You know what? I tell you what. For 30 minutes, TV can't be on. 30 minutes a day, no TV, no right. This is what we're going to do. You know, until you can prove to me that you're responsible enough, hey, you can sit right here in the kitchen and study with me. While you're studying, I could do some other things. You know, everything is not the death of take everything away from them, lock them in a room. You know, they can only go out to go to school, come back. We got to have some compassion. You know, and we just talked about understanding. Because remember, if you're not doing this and somebody in the world is doing this, they're going to be the ones that's going to be influencing your kids. Because as human beings, we all need that. As parents, sometimes, I don't know, because I was at that place too, we forget about this. But as human beings, we all need that. Think about yourself right now. You need those things and you desire those things. And that's the quote again, so we won't go through that again. Conscience and confidence. This is the stage where we know our choices will create a negative impact, but we still believe things will work out for the better. That's the kids who tell me I cut class every day, but I still thought I was going to pass this class. I didn't do any homework, but somehow I thought I was not going to be in summer school. Kid says, I hate school. I said, okay, but you cut class, and now you're in school in the summertime. What could be a worse punishment? But they never think about it. In their minds, they're thinking it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. And think about a lot of young people, that's how they think. See, we've been around the block, so we understand choices and consequences. A lot of young people, because as parents, we protect them. They don't get the choices and consequences. So they make bad choices thinking in their mind it's going to turn out all right. Maybe dad will rescue me, mom will rescue me, mom will come get me out, or hey, it'll work out some kind of way. Mom will come up to the school and talk to the teacher and it's just all going to go away. They start making choices based on that. So we got to make sure, man, at this stage of the game, man, that, we don't get duped or fooled into thinking that, these kids got it all together and we just leave them alone. We're parents. And I got news for you. If anybody with kids 18 or older, let me tell you, my kids are grown. My youngest is 22. I'm still a parent. It doesn't go away. They're going to come back to you and ask you questions. They're going to come back to you, tap into you what your experience is, buying a house, getting married, all that stuff. They're going to come back to you if you do the right thing as a parent. So don't think, I can't wait till they get 18. You signed up for this for life. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing because you want your kids to come to you and not them. But remember this stage because you want to raise your kids so they understand choices and consequences. You don't want them thinking I could do this and get away with it. You want them thinking, okay, what are the consequences if I do this? Am I prepared to suffer the consequence? And if they are, there's nothing we really can do. But at least give them the tools to think about it. Okay, if I do this, there's going to be consequences. Can I deal with the consequences? People used to always ask me, man, you don't get in trouble in school. Oh, you're afraid. You're afraid of the teachers. No, I was afraid of my pop. I was afraid if I had to go home and tell my dad, or if they call home and they knew before I got home, it was over. So we got to make sure, and I'm not saying install fear, but install respect. Have them respect you enough that they at least listen to what you say. Have them respect you enough to at least entertain what you have to say. And let them make a choice. But never let it be said that you didn't give them the information they need to be successful. I always tell my kids, you will never be on Movie Povert saying, I didn't tell you this because I told you. Now, if you choose to use it, that's up to you. But make sure you're giving them the tools. Make sure, especially at this stage, that they understand that it's not always going to work out for the good when you make bad choices. That there is such a thing as choices and consequences. Whatever you feed will grow stronger. What you feed in the dark will ultimately become strong in the light. This is one of my favorite sayings. I'm an author, and I wrote this in a book, When Grown Men Play Hide and Seek, for fathers. And that was one of the chapters. And that chapter got the biggest, I got so many phone calls, text messages, because people are like, yeah, that's true. Because a lot of times your kids don't realize they're sneaking and doing something, and they think it's not hurting anybody, but they're forming bad habits. Start out taking $20 out your purse when you're not around. Now I get older, I need 40. You know, now you come around saying, what happened to my money? Now I got to lie to you. You know, because I don't want to do it. That stuff, it becomes habitual. You know, if you're not talking to your kid when they're 4 years old, when they get 14 years old, there's not going to be a whole lot of conversations. Whoever they were talking to, they will continue to talk to. You know, whatever you feed in the dark is going to go stronger. You may think you're picking up bad habits and nobody's around, but eventually they come out. It's just like, I was laughing because somebody told me the other day, they said, yo, when I was in college, I Googled everything. They had an online course, they Googled everything. When they got to the final, they had to go in the classroom and take the final, and they failed because they were cheating. They were getting all the answers off of Google. They were getting all the answers off of Google. So when they come to take, to take the final, they failed. Same thing. Behind the scenes, everybody thought you was a great student. But eventually, because you didn't prepare, it catches up to you. It catches up to you. And our kids need to know that. We need to know that as parents too. Because we're going to get to that. We got to lead by example. I think it's very important that we do understand that. This stage creates the inner struggle for many, and it does. This is a stage, man, where you really start to struggle with yourself. You really have those, man, you really start to count the cost. When I was at that stage in my life, I was like, man, if I do this, my dad's going to kill me. Then it was, well, if I do this, then I don't get caught. I started reasoning in my head, started thinking those different things, and we got to be aware of that. But then I would think, well, if I do this and I get caught, these are the consequences, not just my dad. And there were some things I didn't get caught, and I picked up some bad habits that I had to get rid of. It's like, another example, you start smoking, your kids start smoking when you're not around. Now all of a sudden they're 20, 25 years old and they're a chain smoker. They started sneaking, but now all of a sudden, well, I'm grown now, so I can just, so those things we do, we think they're not gonna know, and we gotta tell our kids that. And this comes back to you. You gotta make sure you're constantly having conversations with your kids. Young people, you gotta make sure you're talking to your parents. Your parents should be your first go-to, not your friends, not your brother. Your parents need to be the ones you go to. And as parents, you need to tell your kids it's okay. We had a rule, and with my kids now, we had a rule. When you come to me, I probably chewed a lot of gum, grinded my teeth, bit my tongue about more times than I like to count, but I'm gonna do my best not to get upset no matter what you tell me. Because I didn't want them to be afraid to come to me with that tough thing, because they think I'm going to explode, because they think I'm going to go off. Because now they're not going to come to me or you, they're going to go to somebody else. And chances are the person they go to is going to be somebody looking to get the answer they want to get, not what you would give them. And that's why a lot of stuff we found out about our kids when they get older, that because it's stuff they did in the dark. It's hilarious because we get together, we go out to dinner like once a month. My kids are grown, or we went on vacation together. We go on vacation together sometimes. And you'll hear them tell stuff that I never knew happened. Oh man, remember the time we did this, man? And then I'm like, what? And, they figured out they grown, who cares now? But so there are a lot of stuff our kids do, and we think we know our kids, we don't know. But that's why we gotta make sure at this stage, man, that as they're struggling with themselves, do I do the right thing? Peer pressure is real at this age. Because now all my friends are doing this. Do I cut class like them? I just told you about a bunch of kids. They're all in summer school because they cut class to hang out with their friends. And when you talk to them about it, none of them could give you a good excuse. So we got to be careful about this stage right here. I know people says, not my kid. Yes, your kid. We got to be careful right here. Sometimes kids will look at another kid and they'll say, man, he does this wrong stuff every day. And his mom never gets mad at him because that's what he's telling them. They don't know when they get home she's waiting for him. They don't know if she get home. So they see that and they think that's okay. Well, his dad don't get mad at him. They don't know what's going on behind the scene. And be honest, sometimes as parents, we do the same thing. We'll look at something on the surface and we think that's the way it is. And we don't know what's going on behind the scene. But we got to be careful at this stage because kids start to form their reality. Their norms be formed off of that because they're not thinking behind the scenes. They're thinking what they see right in front of them. All they know is Jessie does all this stuff and she never gets in trouble. They don't know maybe Jessie's parents don't care. Maybe Jessie goes home. They don't know her home situation. So we got to make sure, man, at this stage, man, that we're present, we're there, we're on the scene, man, and we're investing in our kids. Still no questions, comments? Yes?
I have a comment about social media and Facebook. I used to go on Facebook and then I would always read everyone's posts and everyone's like, oh, I'm going on a great vacation or I have a great house or my kid's an A+ student. And it started to make me feel bad about myself. You know, but that's not real. They're only showing you what they want you to see. So I stopped going on Facebook. I'm like, I'm not wasting my time on that.
But it's funny you should say that because I'm on nonprofits, you can tell, and one of the things I do is I work with couples. And a lot of couples have that issue because some husband or wife will put up how great their life is. You know, my husband buys me diamonds, my husband buys me this, and they put up there, and she's like, well, why are you not buying me diamonds? You know, my husband took me on this whirlwind trip. Why are you not taking me on this trip? The problem is, I would venture to say probably 50, 60% of the stuff you see on there is not true. You know, I've known people who I grew up with, and they would post something, I'm saying to myself, that's not true. You know, I was this great person. No, you weren't. You know, so you got to be careful. And just like you said that, imagine what it does to kids. You know, now they're more TikTok. 2 years ago, kids were tearing up a bathroom in the school. We kept trying to figure out why they tearing this bathroom up in the charter school in New Jersey. Somebody posted it there on TikTok. Tear up your school bathroom. Every kid, they're laughing. They know exactly what I'm talking about. But see, we don't realize that's the influence that stuff has. So if it has that on you as an adult, they're cracking up. They know exactly what I'm talking about. Just think about that. So what is that doing to your kid's brain who hasn't been formed yet? Or if your kid, I want to be popular. How else can I be popular? Oh, I got to do what everybody else is doing. You know, I got to dress like everybody else is dressed. I got to do all this stuff, you know, and so just imagine. And not thank you for sharing that, but just think about what that does to a kid. Because if you felt bad, imagine what some 16-year-old girl feels like. Some 16-year-old boy who maybe he's not blossomed yet. He got pimples or he got, you know, and it happens. You know, and if that's you out there, let me tell you, man, I was just like that in high school. I was quiet, I was withdrawn. I had a teacher told me I talked too much, I was never gonna make it. I do pretty good running my mouth now, and I wasn't. But she's laughing. But I go to my high school reunion, it's a whole different story. People remember stuff totally different. So yeah, you may be blossoming, but I'm telling you now, you're gonna blossom and you're gonna grow. And you gotta tell your kids that, man. As you grow older, you're gonna grow into this amazing person. Because I said it Monday, there's only one of you. You gotta tell your kids, you can have identical twin. Your DNA is gonna be different, your fingerprints are gonna be different, you are unique. That's the kind of conversation we gotta have with our kids. So when the kids tell them they too dark, they too light, they too skinny, they too fat, you gotta have those conversations. Yo, I love you just the way you are. They need to hear that from us, from our parents. You need to hear it from people who love them and nurture them, who's supposed to protect them. We got to make sure, man, that's how you help raise a positive child. Because if you beating them up when the road is beating them up, what you gonna get? So we got to make sure, man. But thank you again for sharing that. You know, we strive daily to do better each day. That should be the goal. As a parent, we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Never will be. But every day our goal as parents should be trying to get better. And that's what we should be telling our kids. Every day they should be trying to get better. Not perfect, but better. You made this mistake, okay, 3 weeks from now, hopefully you're not making the same mistake. You know, sometimes you may have to step in and guide them and give them some pointers about how not to do it. But, you know, their goal should be to get better, not perfect. Because I meet with kids, and some of the kids are under so much pressure. You know, my father made it seem like he never jaywalked. He never littered. You had one of them too. Every conversation was, everywhere he went, he walked uphill, which is impossible. As an adult, I realized that is totally impossible. But as a kid, you're like, man, you know, I walked uphill to go to school. I walked uphill to come home from school. And as a kid, you eat it up. As you get older, you realize, yo, that's impossible. You know, it always rained where he was. It didn't rain anywhere else. Wherever he was, it was like the worst weather. So I grew up thinking in my mind, like, man, you know, as I got older, I'm thinking like, man. So we got to be careful. We're going to talk about that. What messages are we sending to our kids, man? Because it does impact them. It does impact them. A thought process is centered on being the best possible individual, leader possible, or children and their families. I say leader because I think sometimes parents, well, I know sometimes parents don't understand that you are a leader. You may not be running a business. You may not be running a Fortune 500 company, you know, but guess what? You're managing some of the greatest assets that we have. That's human capital. That's your kids. You are a leader. You know, you can take leadership and describe it any way you want it, but you are a leader in your house. You can't get rid of it. You can't deny it. You are. Because if we go back to the first one, that blank canvas, who you think is shaping their early years of their kids? They're watching you, how you handle your anger, how you handle your frustration. They watch how you treat your wife, how you treat your husband. They watch how you respond to different things. They see how many times you read a book. I get on dads all the time, man. You tell your kid education is important, but you never go to back to school night. But if the kid is playing sports, you don't miss a game. So now, what do you think is important to that kid? You show up at all my games, but you don't show up at one teacher conference. But yet you're telling me how important education is. We got to make sure, man, that we're sending the right messages. We got to make sure we are. And I have 3 athletes, so I know exactly what's going on. Doing what's right becomes our compass, leading by example. And as parents, that's what we got to make sure we understand, we're leading by example. So there's 3 things. There's a couple things. One is be a great role model. Your children, you are your child's first role model. You are. When I come back next week, I'll have copies of this. I forgot them. I brought copies last time. So I'll have this printed out for you so you can take it. You are your child's role model. Well, my daughter was like, man, I guess she was like 11 years old. And I was outside doing some work. And I remember her, she was outside, we were doing some work. After 11, you can't get them to do work. So I want to say that now. It becomes a real chore after 11. When they're 11, they want to help you with everything. But after that, it's like, they go the opposite way, man. And she said, Dad, I want to marry somebody just like you. That was like, wow. I thought about that. And think about it as a parent. You're the first example of a wife, a husband, or whatever it is. You're the first example they see. You're the first example of family. Before they even go to school, you are the first example of family. That blank canvas, you're painting on it, and you are laying the foundation, for who they are and who they become. So you're a role model. It's like, we all guilty to some time or another. It's like we tell our kids, don't lie. Don't you lie, it's wrong. That somebody called a house, you don't want to talk to you, what do you say? Tell them I'm not home. That's your response. But I used to do the same thing. You do, it's like, that's one of them generational things that get passed down. Don't answer the doorbell, we don't want to talk to them. We do. But we're teaching them to lie. Not on purpose, but we are. Supermarket, I see people walk around the supermarket, eating up a bunch of stuff, man, they know they're not going to pay for. You're stealing. You're stealing. You're teaching your kid is okay. You're teaching your kid is okay. Then you get upset when your kid come home and he got in trouble for shoplifting a candy bar or something. He don't know because I watched mom and dad do it their whole lives. I think that's the norm. So we got to make sure, man, that, we are being good role models. It's funny because I'll sit down, I have kids sometimes and they curse, man. You talking about curse, whoo. And the parent will come up there after 2 minutes with the parents, I know exactly where they got it from. 2 minutes into the meeting, the parents, that little blankety blank, like, whoa, yeah. I'm a blankety blank, blank, blank. Okay, I don't know where they get it from. They got it from you. I can't say that. So we have to be mindful of the stuff we do at home. Teach daily chores as patient. Kids don't like this part. My kids would tell you, man, that, I gave them chores. And the reason why I gave them chores, I gave them a chance to earn allowance, wasn't a whole lot of money, but I wanted them to understand and get their early lessons of that you got to work. That there's no free rides in this world. Plus you're not going to be 40 years old living in my basement. We had this clear understanding, that ain't happening. But teach them early, man. It don't have to be a whole lot of money. Have that thing, you do some chores around the house, and plus you working all day long. You need a break too. Give them something to do. They can, if they got a dishwasher, they can load the dishwasher. If they had, they can sweep. Hopefully they know how to sweep. They can run a vacuum. They can do certain things. Keep your room clean. Now, I'm not saying make them slaves of service, but teach them early on that, you need a work ethic. Because how many people I come across who don't have a work ethic? Who thinks I'm just going to show up and get paid? And when you get into a conversation, they got away with it at home. So it's important that we teach them work. And don't feel bad. I hear parents, well, no, that's not torture. Teach them. My son came home in 11th grade and told me, Dad, I don't want to go to college. He's real good in basketball. Okay, no problem. My wife was panicking. Man, I had him cutting down trees. I had him moving rocks. I had him moving dirt. I got him a job down at the Constitution Center, washing dishes, cleaning out grease traps. At the end of the summer, what school I want to go to? You got to teach them, man. It's okay if you choose that, but this is what you need to be able to do the rest of your life. So if you want to do manual labor, yo, this is what manual labor looks like. And if they want to do it, that's fine. I'm not saying it's bad. But this generation's not cut out for manual labor. I can tell you that now. Like, they think it's hot now. Suppose you got to go to work and be out here every day. So I think it's important that we do give them light chores to do. And your allowance doesn't have to be a whole lot. And don't be those parents, man, that says, allowance. I put food on your table. I put a roof over your head. You got a bed to sleep in. Don't be that guy. Don't be that parent, man. That's what you're supposed to do. But, teach them, hey, you work, you can get paid. You have a work ethic, you get paid. Your kids need to know as, you get out of life what you put into life. That there's no free rides. Because I can tell you now, there's a whole generation out here who thinks somebody owes them something. They think somebody owes them something. Never stress your child. What I mean by that is, don't be that parent that your child asks you for something and you start telling them, man, I got to work 6 jobs to get you a pair of sneakers. You making them feel bad. Man, I can't afford that. That's a whole month's pay. Your kid don't need to know that. It's like, I always get in trouble when I say this. It's like when people decide to tell other people's kids that the dude around Christmas time, you know what I'm talking about? Like, why are you worried about that? Why are you so consumed with taking, and in my humble opinion, I think we rob kids out of their imagination because we take stuff like that away from them. If your kid is 14 years old and he still believes that, you got a bigger problem than believing in that. You do, you got a bigger problem. They will grow and they'll figure it out. It's okay to let kids be a child. Let them be a child. Don't put your problems on them. I do a lot of stuff in fatherhood and I go back and forth because I'm talking to moms complaining to the kid, dads complaining to the kid. That's not that child's place. He's not the mediator. She's not the mediator. At 10 and 12, that's not your confidant. They don't need to know that your family is going through tough financial times. Believe me, they know. They know when they go to school and this is what they have and somebody said, they know. But as parents, sometimes we feel like we got to tell them and you don't. Why you want to stress them out? I have kids who don't go to school because they work to help out around the house. And so I'm not saying I'm not judging. But often I ask the kids one question. I understand that you chose to do that, and you really want to do it, but let me ask you a question. What's going to happen 5 years from now? I said, it's like the airplane. The airplane, you go on an airplane, the mask comes down, what do they say? Take care of yourself first before you take care of somebody else. By not going to school, will you be in position to take care of your parents or family later? No. So now the cycle repeats itself. So we got to make sure we're not stressing them out, making them feel like they got to take on adult responsibilities. Point towards the light. What I mean by that is, don't be the bad luck schlep rock either. Every time something happens, you got a doomed, depressing story to tell them. Man, when I was a kid, my friend Leroy, man, he lit a match and burned the whole house down. Man, when I was a friend, man, when I was a kid, my friend Betty, man, she fell and her whole kneecap got infected. We say stuff, we tell all these horror stories to our kids. No, be positive. Kid fails one test and we got him going to jail now. That one test, you want to go to jail for that. You got to do better. No, have some, you know what, this is what we can do working together. Have some positive stuff. And this is another kid. Talk to your kids more than when they're in trouble. It's okay to have conversations with your kids other than when they get in trouble. It's okay to say, hey, how was your day today? It's okay to say, hey, hey, let's go get some ice cream if you can. I had date night with my kids and it wasn't about spending money. Sometimes my daughter and I would just go walk around the mall and maybe I would get an ice cream cone or something, but we talked, we spent time together. And as an adult, we have lunch together once in a while. Same thing with my boys. I didn't call it date night, but we do shot basketball. So we go out, we hit golf balls. We all suck at it, but we go out and we hit golf balls. So you see how it carries on to adult life? So you need to have those conversations now with your kids, man. Talk to them while they're young. Get them used to talking to you. Sow those seeds of conversation now, man. And be positive around your kids. Tell them, because we live in a tough world right now. And I don't look at the news. My wife looks at the news. I'm the guy, I can't look at the news because if I look at the news, I'm kind of angry all day. So I know that, so I don't look at the news. She does. And she's not going to see this tape. That's why she's angry most of the time. Because seriously, you looking at the news and you seeing people getting killed, murdered, mayhem, everybody's always robbing somebody, nobody trusts anybody. There's the bad stories about this long. The short stories about this long. And we expose ourselves to that all the time. So then what happens when our kids do something, it comes out. In our mind, we already got little Johnny going to jail for 4th-degree murder, you know, and all he did was cut a glass. That's where it all starts at. You know, we do. Because we just put this stuff in our system all the time, man. And so we start to come out, and now I start to put it on him. Now it's on him. You know, especially if I did something when I was a kid, you know, and I did something a little crazy. Now all of a sudden, he could be innocent as day as long. In your mind, you take it out on him. So we got to make sure we're saying positive stuff to our kids too, man. Encourage them. You know, it's not, you know, you look nice today. I like the hairstyle. You know, my daughter's grown. My daughter is 32 years old, and I still call her my princess. You know, I'll text her or whatever. I give her encouraging message. I still do it. All my kids. My son is away on a business trip in Washington. You know, he ain't called his mom. Yo, dude, you got to call your mom. Text her something. Yeah, you know, he's like, what? I said, yo, because we expect to hear from you. He's 35. We expect to hear from you. He knows. So when I got home today, oh man, you know, Chris called me. He talks, yeah, that's cool. So we got to make sure, man, that we're putting positive stuff in our kids, man. We got to make sure that we're doing it, man. Listen to your child. We have to learn to not just hear them, but listen to them. And what I mean by that is, I do in couples therapy, this is a big issue all the time. I hear you, I hear you, I hear you, but you're not listening to me. You hear the words coming out of my mouth, but you're not listening to what I'm actually saying. And as humans, because of all the noise that's around us, we do that a lot. Somebody could walk up to you and say, hey, you know, it's raining outside. And before the sigh get out your mouth, you got a response. You know, that's not listening. You heard what I said, but you ain't listened to what I say. You know, somebody could come over to you. You know, we're like that. We're forming a sentence in our head before they finish talking, especially when it comes to our kids. That means we're not, if you're thinking and you're responsible before I'm finished, you're not listening to me. You're hearing the words come out of my mouth, but you're not listening to me. We all have had this happen to us. You ever been annoyed? You spend 5 minutes talking to somebody, then they ask you the same question? I'll be in meetings, and and then the meeting is over. Somebody say, well, you forgot to talk about this. Dude, did you pay attention? It's right here. You know, and to me, that's the most irritating thing. But that makes me realize I hear the words, but am I listening? Listen to your kids. Listen to what they're telling you. You know, because sometimes you listen, you know, to probe and dig a little deeper. You know, yes.
That's called the active listening.
So we got the corporate person there now, the active listening. It is. But how many people do you know actually practice that, honestly? And your day-to-day, how many people do you encounter during the course of the day? I do restorative circles, you know, for schools in Norristown. And the teachers in the classroom, they're always amazed at some of the stuff the kids say. And I can't say it to the teachers, but in my mind, did you ever ask them? You know, like how many teachers ever say, don't answer? Well, how many teachers ever really asked you how you were doing? They don't. A kid told me she's in summer school because she missed school. Well, why did you miss school? Because, you know, she says she has an immune, deficiency disease. So she's in wintertime, it's hard for her to come out. So the teacher was like, well, I never knew that. Yeah, but you knew enough to fail her. Nobody knew enough to say, hey, why are you not coming to school? Because I hear you, but I'm not listening to you. You know, some of the kids speak so well in the circle when you ask them a question, and it never fails a teacher will say, well, I didn't know you could speak like that. Have you ever really engaged this kid in a conversation other than sit down, be quiet, do your work, turn your work in? You know, kids say all the time, nobody listens to me. You hear kids say that, you ask them, especially kids who get in trouble, when you really talk to them, because nobody listens to me. So how would you feel if nobody listened to you? If you felt like you were doing your best work and nobody listened to you? So that's how our kids feel. So we got to make sure we're listening to them. And sometimes it means you got to turn the TV off. Sometimes it means you turn the music off. Sometimes it means you got to, you know, stop cooking those greens or whatever it is you cook and turn around and say, hey, you know, especially if your kid says, I really need to talk to you. That's not the time you say, well, can we hold on and come? No, you got to make sure, if all possible, that you actually listen to them. You know, did you know suicide rates are going through the roof now? Suicide rates are going through the roof. You know, for men, for kids, every population, the suicide rates are growing, and they're growing rapidly. You know, and I always ask myself, is this a case where somebody was telling somebody and we just didn't hear them? We just didn't listen to them. You know, maybe somebody's saying, man, my life is just too rough and I don't know what to do. I can't handle it. And we say, okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. You know, are we really listening when somebody says, I can't handle something? You know, your kid says, this class is too tough for me. And we come back, you just lazy. Are we really listening to what they're saying to us? So we got to make sure, man, that we're listening to our kids, man. Stay away from negative feelings. And what I mean by that is, I'm very conscious of how I respond to stuff. I am. And this goes back to what I said earlier. If your child sees you breaking stuff when you get angry, you're teaching your child that's okay. If your child sees you and your partner duking it out when you get angry, you're teaching your child that's okay. If you're in there flipping and slamming every time something goes wrong in the house, you're teaching your child that's how I can express my anger or my frustration. The things we do in front of our kids, we're teaching them. And I want to say this. People learn more by what they see than what they hear. I hear you talking to me, but just like you talked about social media, that whole visual. Now, if you were in a room and somebody was talking, you probably just like, psh, but because you could see it, it made a difference. It made a difference. And when you see stuff, you follow it away. So we got to make sure, man, that we're, you know, my mom and dad, you know, I laugh and joke as a double-edged sword. I said they messed me up when I got married because I never saw my mom and dad argue. So I thought when I got married, it was going to be just like that. I figured out probably by the second week, that's not the way it was. You know, my father would say something, my mom would do it, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is what it's all about. You know, then you get married, like, yo, then you realize as you get older, you know, you just didn't see stuff because they did it behind closed doors. Because my mom would wait until they got behind closed doors, then she would have a conversation. You know, she just wouldn't respond because she wasn't going to do it in front of us. So we got to make sure that, you know, everything we do, they don't have to see and know about. So we got to make sure. It's kind of like kids who don't respect teachers. And this is, you know, I'll be sitting down talking to a parent, talking to a kid, and she'll say, well, why don't you respect the teacher? I said, Mom, I heard you tell Dad that the teacher was stupid. Because you in the front seat having this conversation about how dumb the teacher is, and the kid in the back sucking it up. She don't know what she's talking about. So we do things, so we got to make sure, man, that we're modeling, you know, good behavior. And we're getting close to the end. We're right there. Questions, comments, feedback. That's my contact information up there. I will bring the handouts next Monday. If you're here, if not, I'll drop them with Alexis.